Alright, hello everyone, welcome back. I'm your friend in Saxo. Today we're going to learn how to build in an application with Spring Boot. As we all know, the Spring Boot is nothing but a JavaScript framework that could help you to develop your server application, for example, a website backend or something like that. Okay, at the beginning, we need to download the project because we are going to do the experiment based on that project. Okay, something like this. I don't really care too much about that. I'll just hit the generate button here so that it will download a zip file for us. Then we could use that to actually, this is our project. Right, after we get that project, we could actually open it. And this is what we got at the beginning. According to this tutorial, it will ask us to create a simple web application. The name for that file is hellocontroller.java and it contains the following code. Let me just do a copy for it. Then I have already passed that file into our folder. Then what's next? Yeah, I don't know. Probably we could be able to run the application right here. Maybe if we click this button, it will work. Okay, let's see what we got. From the beginning, we got the greetings from Spring Boot. Where does that come from? It's coming from this line of code. And I would say it's just a magic because as you could say from the main function in here, we didn't specify any entry point for this controller, but it somehow get into there correctly. Here it suggests us to modify the application.java file. Will we do that properly? Let me try it out. Okay, so after the pasting, after all of the code, if we run this software again, and this is what we got, a list of I don't know what. Seems like it's just some packages or classes, I don't know. And it says that let's inspect the beans provided by the Spring Boot. So the problem is, what is beans?
Beans.
Clearly, this is not an official name for anything. Probably it's just a joke. Okay, I don't care. Let's go on. Spring Boot application is a convenience annotation that adds all the following. For example, the configuration for that application, and also enable the auto configuration, and the component scheme tells the Spring to look for other components or services inside of the com.example package to let it find the controllers. So now we know why that the application could find this controller because it has some logic inside of its declaration function, I guess. There's also a command line runner method marked as a bean, and this runs on the startup. It will retrieve all the beans that were created by your application or that were automatically added by Spring Boot. It will shorten and print them out. It's something that we say right here, all those stuffs. Here it teaches us to run the application by using this command line or this command line. But to be honest, we don't need that since we're using the intelligent IDEA. Then it's talking about the tests. But I think we don't need to learn that for now. The last example showed how Spring Boot lets you wire beans that you may not be aware you need. It also showed how to turn on convenient management services. However, Spring Boot does more than that. It supports not only traditional WAR file developments, but also lets you put together executable JRs. What is that? Here's another content, serving web content with Spring MVC. It's probably another topic that we're gonna cover. No, I don't think that's the one that we should look for because it teaches you how can you use a pure HTML code with that framework. To be honest, that's quite I say out of state or out of date. It's not a good idea for doing that. Instead, we should always try to create a RESTful API, then separate it out from the front-end developments. That's the right way for now, for the modern society. Let's now forget about the tutorial, as I think it didn't really show us how to do things. By knowing how to print out the hello world from the main endpoint doesn't make us feel better. It won't teach you anything. So let's go on and do some experiment by ourselves. Now, if I want to visit a subroute, for example, in Saxo, what we would get. We got nothing. We got the right label error page, which means we don't have any handler for this URL. How can we make it? How can we make one that will fit our needs? Well, let me say, I'll just say in Saxo. Will this work? No, I'm gonna give it a unique function. How about we say in Saxo, and for this time, we will try to print out my name. I hope it will work. No, it's not. So why it's not working? Because for the Java, it's a compilable program language. It will not refresh itself when you change the code. Instead, you should always try to rebuild that application again whenever you want to do a test after you modify your code. Alright, now if we go back to this again, if I do a refresh now, you will say that I got it correct right here. So for the get function, I think it's quite easy since we're using the get mapping. But how? How about we do it differently? How about we set a post mapping? For this one, it's also quite simple. All you have to do is to call the decorator post mapping, and that will do it for you. But for now, I will not test it, since if we want to test it, we will have to use some other tools. But I don't want to do that. For now, let's get into a higher level. How can we return an object or data class? Someone of you may say. Well, I don't know. So let's do a search. Okay, if we want to return a Johnson response, the first method is to use a map. In the end, we will return, by doing this, in the end, we will return a hash map. That's one method. Okay, but another method that we could choose to do is to create a class. Basically, this is a data class, but in here, in Java, they do not have that name. But we'll try to do that by myself. Okay, so now I have defined a class called person, and for this person, it basically has two properties, name and sex. For now, you could choose to write all of those code by yourself, but that's a stupid idea. Since we are using the IDE, right, it could generate the code for us so that we could save a lot of time to do something else. For now, after I hit the generate button, then we could choose to generate the constructor, and we could choose which parameters we want. Here I'll choose both of them. Then I hit the OK button. After that, you should say that we got our constructor available. Then I hit the generator again. For this time, I'll say that I want it to generate the scatter and setters automatically so that I don't have to do it by myself. As you could say, those codes are quite simple, but if you do it manually, you'll get tired. Alright, after this, let's go back and see if we could just return that object to the outside world. So return new person with a len equal to insaxo and with a sex equal to 1. Okay, after that, let me try to run the whole program again. Yeah, I must say it's working, since now we got a Johnson file or Johnson text, and this text was coming from the Java object or Java class, then a map. So by doing so, in the end, you could just do some modification with the Java class, and that could be quite simple since it has all those auto completion functionality built inside. So by doing so, you will have, say, a lot of flexibility out there. Alright, enough playing. Now let's get into the business. For now, what I have showed you guys is how can you create a URL, and based on that URL, how can you return some data from the Java side. But that's not enough. What's more important for us to do is to actually let the server program to connect with the database and to handle some data inside of that database. That's what we want to do. So for now, what I'm going to do is to let the Java connect to the MySQL database. Okay, if we want to do that according to those tutorials, it says that we should first include some dependencies, for example, the database driver. And that dependencies should be put inside of the pom.xml file. So this is the first dependency, MySQL connector Java, and the second one is Spring Boot starter JDBC. By adding those dependencies declaration is not enough. We need to let the IDE to load those packages for us. How can we do that? Well, we could go to the map option, then we will choose a reload project. This will let the IDE load all those packages for us. Okay, after that, if you for anyone who have ever did the programming with C# or in the Microsoft VS Code or something like that, for their software, they have a design logic, which is you have to put every important parameters, for example, the database URL or the database username password into the configurations of your application. So we should put those informations into this file, application properties. All right, if we want to use our database as the first step, for the first step, what we need to do is to actually access our database and try to create a new database. I know it's quite hard to understand, but if you can get into your shell, then if you run this command, mysql rt with a password, okay, then you could get into your MySQL shell. From there, how can we create a new database? We call this command, create database with your database name. And that will be, let's say, just test. Okay, after that, let me go back and configure this one. After we have configured all those parameters, configurations about your database, we are ready to go. Let's go back to the framework again. Okay, I would just copy those code right in there. From here, you can say those SQL command. To be honest, you could try to use those raw SQL command, but I do not recommend that because you will make mistakes and it's quite tedious to use those SQL command by yourself. So what we do is to use some packaging to handle that for us. After we have added that dependencies, and we also added some new parameters for the whole project or configurations for the whole project, what we do is to map the Java code to the database. So under the hook, what it does is to convert the Java code into the SQML command automatically and doing all those work for us. But this has a good point, which is we do not have to know anything about the SQL. All we have to know is it's a Java code. So somehow this will simplify our work if we know nothing about the Java. So let's go. Okay, after we have added all those code, as you could see right now, we got an error. It says that we do not have a data source, so we need to add one. So how can we do that? We can go to the View, Tool, Windows, and Database. View, Tool, Window, Database. And from there, we got a new window. For that window, we will just try to add a data source, which is try to add a new database. It can be whatever you like. For example, the MongoDB, MySQL, PostgreSQL, whatever you like. But for now, I'll just choose MySQL. And by doing so, you'll get a new window. What you need to do is to fill all those informations that it needed to connect to that database. And if you did a test connection, if you say the yes right in there, that means you have successfully added a new data source. Now, if we go back to our code, we could assign a data source for that code with the new one that we just added. After we hit the OK button, we should be done. Alright guys, after struggling for a while, now I know all those logics behind the database bounding. So basically, as the first we need to try to create a class data or data class, as you know, as I already said before. But the only different part is that you have to add the entity decorator right in here, and also the table name for this class. So in the theory, each class in the Java represent a table in the database. That's how they define it. And also, if you want me to express that, to explain that, that would be let's say for each row inside of the database, especially for that table, it's one instance of the Java class, something like that. So for this class, it will create a table called person right here. And then how can we use that? What's the benefit we could get from this design logic? Well, as I said, what we need to do is to create an interface for that class. How can we do that? Let me do it again here, because I'll delete the old one. So what we do here is to create a new Java class, but it's not a Java class, it's an interface. So I'm gonna say person interface. And for now, I'm going to choose the interface right there. Now we got an interface, but that's not enough. We need to do some modification for that. We will have to import the GPA repository. Then we are going to extend that extends that interface with the GPA repository class. Okay, after that, we could be able to use this interface, and only when this time you could know why we need to define that interface. For example, now if I say person interface, I hit the dot button, you would say all those commands that we could use. For example, the save, the count, the delete, and the find all, find one, and all sorts of things like that. So by using those functions, we don't have to manually write out all those SQL commands anymore. So this will definitely help us in the future development. For example, let me do a test. Now if I set it up a URL, let's say 8, then we're gonna add one, which is a save function. We will call that function, and we will save a new person. The name for that is Christine, and we're gonna give it an 6. How about 2? Then after that, I'm going to create another URL. For this one, that'll be last, and I'll just return a last of person that we just defined before. How am I gonna do that? I'm going to say return person interface that van all. It is that simple. Okay, now let me just stop this program and run it again. Now if we go to the last URL, we say nothing, we got an empty list. But if we had the add button, if we visit the add URLs, and we go back to the last again, we could say we got a new element or new row of data inside of our database, and we could say it immediately right in here. Yeah, that's how it works. And I think the Spring Boot is really quite simple. So you don't have to worry about all those details. You don't have to care about all those things. And after a few of codings, after you write some code, you could magically get all those things working. That's good. So that's it. And inside of this video, we have learned so many of things. And I hope you have learned something from it. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.